Good evening and welcome to this special episode of Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Now folks, it's a damn pleasure to be sharing the airwaves with you on this, the night of our season finale. That's right, the time has finally come for us to explore the creepiest local legends, the scariest hometown tales, and the most unusual regional folklore our listeners have to offer. Tonight I present to you the latest installment of our long-running Hometown Legends series, Hometown Legends number 17. Now, you know the score here. These are all legends, stories, rumors, tales, and fables from your hometowns, or perhaps places that you used to live in or have a strong connection to. Basically, it's in a gnarly paranormal-themed story about a particular area, an area that's connected to you in some way. That's what qualifies as what we call a hometown legend. Now, before we continue, keep in mind that many of these hometown legends stem from tragic events, so consider that your blanket trigger warning. Discussion of suicide, murder, abuse, neglect, and who knows what else lies ahead. But boy, do I have some good ones lined up for you tonight. A whole slew of them, in fact. So how about we smack this thing with a champagne bottle and send her off to sea? Beginning with this watery entry from Dina, over in Pennsylvania.
Hey Derek, this is Dina from southwestern PA, and I have a hometown legend that I haven't heard. So my hometown legend refers to the mighty Monongahela River. So this river stretches from West Virginia up through the bottom of Pennsylvania and actually makes one of Pittsburgh's three rivers at the point, and then flows on into the Ohio and then into Ohio State. So this river has really seen its share of history. I mean, we have seen the Native Americans, the French and Indian War, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and then God knows what else, the steel mill creation and all the dumping of probably hazardous stuff in it. But anyway, so let's start off with the Native American legend of Monongi, or Mononga, I believe it is. And it is a half fish, half human creature that supposedly lives in the Monongahela River. And according to legend, it would, creep up on the riverbanks and eat livestock and humans and attack people. And there's some images, I believe, online that are pretty ugly, to say the least. Unfortunately, I have not seen Monongi, but there is a Kennywood Parks, is an old amusement park situated on the Monongahela River. And it used to have, in the 90s, I believe, it used to have the Monongahela Monster ride that was like this big steel thing that you would sit on the ends of it, and these arms would swing you out over a big lagoon. I mean, it was just a fun legend, right? So, okay, we're at Kennywood Parks, and I believe that's in Homestead, PA. So if you travel more north, you actually reach a bridge. It's called the Glenwood Bridge, and it's near Homewood, PA, and it's on your way to Pittsburgh. But there's a legend, and it's my favorite, probably one of my favorite Pittsburgh legends. It was in the 1950s. A B-52 bomber left an Air Force base in Nevada and was traveling to another Air Force base on the eastern coast. And unfortunately, it ran out of gas, and it hit some very frigid weather. This was in January. I believe it was January 31st. And I believe in the 1950s. I'm not sure what year. But unfortunately, it crashed in the Monongahela River. And it goes that the occupants actually survived the initial crash, but the frigid waters of Pennsylvania, they actually succumbed to the cold and perished. So they were going to retrieve the wreckage of the plane the next day, I believe. And when, wreckage crews went out, they could not find the plane. And to this day, that B-52 bomber wreckage has not been found. There has been many theories of what happened to this huge B-52 bomber wreckage. Maybe, Mongi ate it, or there was these underwater caverns that the plane sunk into. But my favorite theory is that this B-52 bomber was actually leaving Area 51 carrying some suspicious cargo, whether it be alien technology or alien specimens. We, obviously we'll never know. And the theory goes that during the night that the government came and just completely scrubbed all evidence of this B-52 bomber. Just a couple years ago, our history center, the Heinz History Center down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, actually had a task force that went out and with all of our modern technology to look for this wreckage and any evidence of this plane. And they were not able to find anything. It's awesome that this just a crazy mystery that is, it's still to this day, there's no true answers. I hope you like the story. I know I have more. Have a good night.
Thank you, Dina. Way to kick it off with a 2-story call. Now, the Monongahela River, or the Mon, as locals call it, is home to all sorts of wildlife. But I was not aware that it was home to a half-man, half-fish monster, which is exactly how Mongi is said to appear. But more like the Gillman, or the creature from the Black Lagoon, and less like a mermaid, which is where my mind first went. A literal half-man, half-fish. But I'd never heard of Mongi before all of this, and having grown up pretty close to that area, I'm sort of surprised by that. So we did a little digging, and that's when I realized why we hadn't heard of it. You see, the idea of a monster in the waters of the Mon is centuries old. Natives in that area told of the agua, a giant snapping turtle-like creature that is said to be brown in color, 20 feet long, and is believed to weigh upwards of 500 pounds. And it's even sometimes reported to have 2 heads. Now, it lives in the waters of the Mon in nearby rivers, but is able to come onto land. And legend says witnesses have seen it crush white-tailed deer whole. Now, the agua's origins are said to be from prehistoric times, when giant turtles roamed parts of North America. We did some research, and there was a prehistoric giant turtle that might have lived in that area. A 10-foot bad boy by the name of Atlantochellus. But it seems they went extinct millions of years ago, long before human involvement in that area. And as if a 20-foot giant turtle wasn't enough, locals also tell of another monster that's said to lurk the waters of the Mon. As of late, there have been a number of credible sightings. Alligator sightings reported along its shores. Yeah, that's right, an alligator. And if you don't believe me, This is Chief John Hartman of the Southwest Regional Police describing one of those encounters. And it seems he's taking it pretty seriously.
Local resident was down here at the wharf with a friend. Saw what he believed was a log going against the current, going upstream. Had a spotlight, shined a spotlight on what he believed was a log and lit up what he identified as an alligator. Said he's been a fisherman in these waters all of his life. He knows what he saw. It was not a fish, wasn't a gar, it was an alligator. The head of the gator was out of the water about 7 inches, and he saw the eyes shine, the two eyes looking at him.
Now that clip on behalf of KDKA, CBS News 2, out of Pittsburgh. So it's clear that legends and even sightings persist in the Mon. But chances are really good that they won't be sightings of Monongahela. Because it seems like, for the most part, it's a story that's made up. According to author Denver Michaels, a fictionalized account of Monongahela was added to the annual Search for Monongahela Swim Race's Wikipedia page. And I guess the tale just stuck. Now I've linked to a more detailed video in the show notes that describes the whole miscommunication, along with about 1 million other links related to tonight's stories. So get the full MAU experience. Visit monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the show notes tab to follow along. Now folks, we have a ton of entries to get through this evening, so sadly we will not be able to explore much of the missing bomber portion of this story. But again, if you go to the show notes, I've included a few links with more information on that mysterious disappearance. And trust me when I say I'll work my way back to that story on a future episode. Until then, a huge thank you, Dina, for kicking us off. Now I have a whole collection of hometown legend stories to share with you this evening, but they tell me this is the optimal time for the first commercial break. So let's do that real quick, and I'll be right back with more hometown legends.
He's been able to get his outs with just his two.
Not a teacher, a parent, doing.
Are you tired of feeling self-conscious about thinning hair? Well, you're not alone. Millions of people struggle with hair loss, present company included. But I found with Hims, the solution is simple. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your home. You can choose from personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatment options that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Now, I've been using Hims spray treatment for about a year now, and it's extremely easy. Just spray it on once a day and sit back and wait for the results. I started noticing a real difference at about 3 months in, and the results just keep coming. Now, the process is simple and 100% online. Just answer a few questions, and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, the treatment comes right to your door. Hims has thousands of trusted subscribers just like me. So if you feel like you're losing part of yourself with your hair loss, try Hims and get your confidence back. Start your free online visit at hims.com/monsters. That's HIMS.com/monsters for your personalized hair loss treatment options. HIMS.com/monsters. Results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
Sorry, Rob, I'm gonna go with Calvin on.
Well, we already know that story.
I wish I shared my house with the ghost, so I don't feel like I'm alone. Just some strange specter watching over me, a personal phenomenon.
And that was the Picassos with My Personal Phenomena, a story about a haunted house set to music. Now, longtime listeners of the show know that I like to use these hometown legends to shine a little spotlight on those preserving the paranormal through song. And I'll be peppering more in throughout the evening. And if you like what you hear, the show notes is where you can find a direct link if you'd like to check any of these bands out. Now, speaking of haunted houses, what do you say we explore the ghostly side of these hometown legends? Please welcome Shelley from Parts Unknown.
Hi, Derek. My name is Shelley, and I want to tell you a story about a haunting and possible demonic forces. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and my mom grew up in Spokane, Washington, and she lived next to the Monahan Mansion, which was later sold to Gonzaga University. But when I was little, I remember Mom receiving these letters from her parents. Apparently, the Monahan home was haunted, and there was newspaper articles in Spokane about the demon forces. And I remember Mom reading this to us and really being frightened. She lived in the house right next to the Monahan Mansion when she was little. And so that's why her parents were following this story so closely. And I remember my mom, when she was little, she had written her name in this wet cement. And I remember her saying she was worried that somehow the demons would find her because she had written her name. So when I was little, I remember this made an impression upon me. So fast forward years later, I end up going to Gonzaga University, not because of this story, because my youth minister and one of my teachers took me there for a college visit. So I ended up going to Gonzaga, and in my first year, telling some of my friends about the music building, the Monahan Mansion, being haunted. And so, of course, their eyes lit up and they said, let's go check it out. And there was 4 of us, my roommate and 2 other guys, that wanted to go check it out. And I did not want to because I remember all the articles. I really believed this thing was haunted and there's no way I wanted to go near it. But I was outnumbered. They all said, let's go. So it was probably 11 o'clock at night. So we all got our coats on and left in the night. It was dark. And I remember being so scared. Like, I really believe this. But anyway, there was a guy, I can't remember his name, that kind of hung out with me. And then my roommate and this other guy went with her. They found an open window and they actually got into the mansion. And I could see their flashlights kind of traveling around. And I saw them up at the top floor. I think it was 3rd floor. And then they got to the 2nd floor and then the ground floor. And then I could hear them like in there. And anyway, so all of a sudden there's like siren lights and the security caught them. And meanwhile, the guy that I was with, I can't remember his name. This was so long ago. He and I left, which was terrible. We got afraid and took off. And later found out that she almost got expelled for that. And then I asked one of the older priests about it, and he got mad at me and he said, never talk about that, and shut the door kind of on that conversation. And then a couple years later, my roommate ended up dating one of the security guards that was at Gonzaga, and she asked him about the music building and if it was still haunted. And he said, the building itself isn't haunted anymore, but the basement is. They keep it locked at all times. But they've been known to put like tape recorders down there and like crucifixes. And then the next day, the crucifixes are mangled and there's like music and different things going on the recording. But anyway, that's my story. It's a haunting, and I thought it was a good story. Anyway, I've enjoyed listening to all of the stories, and I really enjoy your podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley. That's what I'm talking about. An infamously haunted mansion, the root of many hometown tales. And a cautionary tale in there as well. A tale that warns that you should be careful legend tripping. These days, it's harder and harder to sneak around. There's more security, more cameras, and many of these places even have vibration sensors that set off silent alarms. So while it's fun and exciting to hunt for the paranormal in these supposedly haunted locales, sometimes it's not worth the legal trouble. And for those of you out there that own these reportedly haunted locations, if you should happen to be listening, make these spaces available to the public, even if it's only a couple of nights a year, around Halloween or something. Hire a guide, charge a fee, donate it to charity. History should be shared, not reserved for those with deep pockets. And now this is me stepping off of my soapbox. But you know, Shelley mentioned an older article. An article that Delaney managed to dig up. An article that ran in the Gonzaga Bulletin, all the way back on April 11th of 1975. And here is some of the phenomena the article claimed took place. An organ heard playing at various times during the day and night, when no one was playing it. Growling and rustling noises coming from the cellar. And a type of force field that made it impossible to pass through a hallway there in the building. Spooky stuff, for sure. So thank you again, Shelley, for sharing it here with us. If the ghosts don't give you a rush, running from the fuzz just might. And you know, Shelley, from the sounds of things, your friends are lucky the law caught them before the spirits did. Thank you again for the phone call. Now, folks, if you have a story you think would be perfect for Monsters Among Us, a true story, call our 24/7 hotline at 888-608-NIGHT. That's 888-608-NIGHT. Or record your story as a voice memo on your cell phone and email it to me at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. You have about 1 week left to get any amusement calls in for our upcoming season premiere. So that clock is ticking. Now our next entry takes us to the bluegrass state of Kentucky. Lydia, welcome back to the show.
Hey everybody, this is Lydia calling again from Kentucky, and this is for the Hometown Legends episode. Okay, this is something I've never witnessed myself, but 3 family members and 1 complete stranger that had no prior knowledge of this tale, and another family friend have seen the same thing in what we lovingly or begrudgingly call the Waynesburg, Kentucky Wendigo. I'm going to try to start getting everybody to call it the Wendigo, just because we don't know what it is. Now, my grandpa's description, I think, is the best one. When he was young, so we're talking like late 30s, early 1940s, extreme rural central Kentucky, around my family's land, like all the family live on this one road kind of thing. You know how rural areas are. Lindy Moore was his name, and Jess Godby, his friend. They were young. I think he said that they were like 11. They had been fishing and were supposed to be back by when the sun went down, and they had fished a little bit late, and they were cutting through cornfields and stuff in this one plot of land that's kind of like a triangle where the road forks and stuff. And as they were cutting through this field, something like rose up out of a little dip that's in the field, and the description is it was white as a ghost and nondescript, but it was as tall as a barn. So we're talking like 13, 14 foot high. And I don't know how wide it was, but it was coming after them, whatever it was. Didn't make noise or anything like that. Creepy enough. And then that thing was seen again by my nephew in the trees. I mean, it's as tall as the trees. My aunt saw it moving around, tall as the trees, tall as a barn. The one person that saw it that had no reference to these family stories, which the family didn't know the stories from each other either, because my grandpa had forgot about it until Jess Godby was on his deathbed and asked my grandpa if he remembered it. And he was like, oh my God, yeah. Okay, so a kid on the school bus was getting off the school bus, and it was in the winter time, so, you know, it gets dark at like 5 o'clock. And it was 4 something, and he saw something in the tree line that was as tall as the trees, white, moving through it really fast. I don't know. What could this thing be? But I thought I had to call that in because we're all, you know, fascinated by it and stuff. I have no idea. Has anybody else seen anything like that? Okay. Derek, keep it spooky, keep it safe, and have a good one.
Thank you, Lydia. Tall as a barn, tall as the trees, 13 or 14 feet high. And this is an older story that occurred, half a century ago, or maybe more. Now, when dissecting this call, a few previous reports come to mind. We've heard tell of the pale crawler, a pale white, tall and gangly creature seen in the eastern half of the country, including parts of Kentucky. But I've never heard of a report describing a 13-foot tall pale crawler, though. That's quite unusual. So like Lydia, I'm stumped here, but I am open to suggestions. So let me know if you too have seen this creature roaming the hills of the Bluegrass State. And thank you again, Lydia, for stopping by. Now, folks, I'm going to squeeze one more entry in before this next break. So, Ivana, welcome to the Hometown Legend Special.
Hi, Derek. This is for your Hometown Legends episode. This is Ivana. I currently live in Florida. However, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is the tale of Irwin Road, sometimes referred to as Blue Mist Road. It is known as being the most haunted road in Pennsylvania and one of the most haunted roads in the United States. Just 15 miles north of Pittsburgh is a county park aptly named North Park. It is a very large park, over 3,000 acres, and this park was built in 1931. Irwin Road is within the park. The road is unlit, and it's only about 2 miles long, with only a portion that is paved. At the end of the paved road, there is a barrier to prevent vehicle access. On Irwin Road, there are the remains of homes and a cemetery that were in place many years prior to the establishment of North Park. Every night after dark, a blue mist settles over the road. Tales are told of murders, mysterious floating orbs, lynchings, and people being chased by ghosts and strange animals. Some say Blue Mist Road was the site of horrific lynchings and murders by the Ku Klux Klan. Another tale is of a mother and her children that were brutally murdered in their home along Blue Mist Road and then buried in a septic tank by their husband and father, and that their ghost still wanders down the street when the sun goes down. There are also the remains of what is called the cult house, where people were murdered in satanic rituals. If you want to experience the paranormal on this road, you drive down Irwin Road after dark up to the traffic barrier, and you honk your horn 3 times. The 3 honks are said to summon the spirits who still roam along the haunted road. There are reports of ghostly bodies hanging from trees, the ghosts of the murdered mother and her children, strange orbs, or even people that report being chased by an angry dog-human hybrid. Paranormal investigators have heard the sound of traditional Indian drums, and the investigators claim to have snapped photos after hearing the drum beats and angry faces appearing in the developed photos. Not all of the ghost stories associated with Irwin Road are scary. In the cemetery that sits off of the road, if you look for the headstones that are leaning toward each other, it is the graves of a husband and wife. On full moon nights, you might see the husband and wife that are buried below dancing in the moonlight. I only recently heard of this legend, despite spending a lot of time at North Park while I was growing up. I am planning on paying a visit to Irwin Road the next time I am in Pittsburgh. Thank you, and I hope you can use this for your next Hometown Legends episode.
Thanks, Ivana. Blue Mist Road. It's certainly got a ring to it. And I love a good haunted road. Mostly because these are places you're actually allowed to visit. You just need a car and to be careful. Don't park your car in the middle of the road. Don't stand in traffic. Don't do anything stupid. We don't need you becoming part of that legend. But you know, this isn't the first time we've heard from the southwestern part of Pennsylvania this evening. And perhaps that shouldn't surprise us, as that part of the state is known to be creepy for sure. So thank you again, Ivana, for adding another data point to support that theory. Now, folks, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with something big, tall, and hairy. Don't go anywhere.
Lead with black lung because hours of feeding the coins in.
Right.
You did have that.
So yes, ultimate. However,
Now, for that furry fable that I promised you, Dee from Idaho. The floor is yours.
Hi there, this is Dee from Idaho, and I'm calling in for a Hometown Legends Season 17. It's more of a home state legend than a hometown legend because this is the story of the Malad gorilla, which is thought to have been one of the first recorded Bigfoot or Sasquatch sightings. But it's from Malad City, Idaho, which is in southeastern Idaho, not far from the Utah border. And apparently in, I believe it was the 1910s or possibly 1920s, there were some kids that were down near a lake that were just fishing and messing around and, you know, being kids. And they heard rustling in the bushes. And out of the bushes pops out a very tall, very smelly ape man thing, which was all over the news at the time. And it's just a story that I thought was interesting that I hadn't heard of until actually quite recently, off of Instagram actually. But I just thought that was a really cool and fun story that would be interesting to hear on Hometown Legends, because I've never heard of anybody calling in out of really anywhere around the Malad City area. And I feel like it's just a pretty underrated area for legendary, well, legends. But that's my hometown legend.
Now that was Creep It Real with their song, Squatch. A delightful little ditty about that big guy we all know. Now if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to check them out over in the show notes, or search Creep It Real over in Spotify. Now you know, when I put the word out for paranormal themed music, I didn't expect to receive so much amazing music. But I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised and excited to share these samples with you. It's fun stuff. Now, as for Dee's telephone call. Now, we got lucky and Delaney managed to dig up some further information on the Malad gorilla, including the article that Dee referenced in his call, an article that originally ran in the Carlisle Journal in Carlisle, Oklahoma on Friday, February 14th, 1902. That's right, I said Oklahoma, and I'll explain that after I read the article. The residents of Chesterfield in Bannock County are alarmed over the appearance in that vicinity of a hairy wild man, 8 feet high. He was first seen January 14th when he appeared before some young people who were skating on the Portneuf River near John Gooch's ranch. The creature flourished a large club and, yelling, chased the skaters who fled. Measurements of the track showed the creature's foot to be 22 inches long and 7 inches wide, with the imprint of only 4 toes. Stockman reported having seen a similar track along the range west of the river. Now, for the truth. Oftentimes, newspaper writers, back in the day, struggled to find stories to run, or the stories that they did have were not sensational enough to sell papers. So they would fabricate a tale and place it somewhere on the back page. Something so fantastic that the general public just had to read about it. A story placed in a far-off town, making it near impossible to verify the tale. Now, I suspect that may be what occurred in regards to the Malad gorilla. Otherwise, you'd think news like that would have originated from the source, the town of Malad itself, or at the very least, a closer, bigger town in the state of Idaho. Now, of course, hopefully, I'm wrong here, because I love the idea of a big, hairy beast out there scaring the children of Idaho. But as I always say, it's important to explore all angles. And not all of these stories can be true. Either way, thank you so much for the fun tale, D. True or not, I love these old reports. Now, speaking of old reports, the subject of the following call began 101 years ago, but still looks as good as the day it was magically created. Please help me welcome Farron to tonight's program.
Hi, Derek. This is Farron from Miami, Florida. I do love your hometown episodes, and I think I heard you on your most recent episode calling out for people to give suggestions. So this is not an entity per se, but you've probably, since I know that you were a fan of Unsolved Mysteries, and I think that they did a segment on this in Leonard Nimoy's show. I forgot what it was called. In Search of, was that it? I don't know, I'm sorry. I think you could talk about Coral Castle here in Miami. Well, actually, it's technically more in Homestead, Florida City. But Coral Castle was this structure, basically a castle kind of thing, made out of these huge blocks of coral rock. I believe it was constructed in the 1920s. The guy who constructed it was named Edward Spellman. He was a Latvian immigrant. I believe he came to the United States. Supposedly the myth is that his heart was broken by his 16-year-old bride and all this kind of odd stuff. So he came to the U.S. I believe he was also some kind of criminal too, perhaps an anarchist. I can't really remember all of that. You'll have to do more research if you're interested. But he made it down to Florida because of his failing health. He had tuberculosis, I believe, and they thought that the climate might be good for him. I doubt it. But this guy was tiny. He was 5 feet tall and like 100 pounds, they say. And he somehow constructed this whole structure of these immense, like tons, these blocks of coral rock. They weighed tons. And the thing is, nobody ever saw him working on it. He, apparently worked by night under this whole shroud of mystery, and people wanted to get a look at it, what he was doing, how he was quarrying these rocks, how he was putting them together, and nobody ever could get a look. And another wild thing is, he moved the whole place. He had it in one location, and I forgot the reason. I don't know if it had to do with him losing the land or them wanting to build a highway. I can't remember. I'm sorry. But he moved the whole thing at some point, and there's a whole story about that as well. But it's just a really mysterious structure, how he got it done. I know there's a lot of information about it on there. Coral Castle does have a website. I visited several times when I was younger. Haven't been in several years, but it's an odd place, but cool. And yeah, nobody knows how he did it. He said something like, "I've harnessed the power of the pyramids," something like that. So many paranormal explanations floating around out there. But anyway, maybe it's not a cryptid, not a ghost, not a haunting, but one of the most interesting things I think about life down here, having that place, and people still haven't figured out how we did it. So I just thought it would be neat. Also, fun fact, I believe the musician Billy Idol, if you like kind of new wave music, or more like pop rock from the 80s, the song Sweet 16 from the album Whiplash Smile was supposedly inspired by that. And actually, if you look up that video on YouTube, it does have a picture of Ed Leeds-Skalman in the very beginning of that video. I believe it says, "Love turned to stone," something like that. I can't exactly remember. But that's just a fun fact about it. So it has inspired many interesting people. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. And I think you said you needed hometown stories, so that's what I have to contribute. I think a lot of people will find that interesting. Also, just one more thing. I know I said this before, but I love your show so much. It's so honest. There's so many other shows out there that present these so-called true stories that sound more like creepypastas. Some of the OG paranormal shows with people's experiences, they have been around forever and they're very interesting, but those can get a little bit repetitive. And you never do. You're always saying new things, researching new things. I love that. You and Sarah and the other people who help with the show just do such an amazing job. And I think I've been listening 6 or 7 years, and if I had some money I'd get on Patreon. Honestly, I owe you, because you have given me countless hours of amazing entertainment. But I just wanted to thank you again. And sorry I'm rambling, and good night.
Thank you for the kind words, Farron. Now, the story of the Coral Castle absolutely belongs here, Farron. Edward Leeds-Skalman's creation has long been rumored to have been built by aliens, anti-gravity, or just plain magic, or who knows what else. And that sort of legend is exactly what the Spirit of Hometown Legends is about. And it's been a hometown legend for a long, long time. In fact, here's a clip from the original version of the television program In Search Of, covering the castle all the way back in 1980.
Coral Castle has been called the 8th wonder of the world. This place is a fantasy garden and an engineering marvel. The blocks are cut and set with great precision, locked without mortar. At 30 tons, the greatest single stone in Coral Castle is twice as massive as any in the pyramids. Here are massive megaliths, huge astrological symbols, and structures whose purpose is a total mystery. Coral Castle was built not in ancient times, but in the 20th century. Most curious of all, Coral Castle was built in secret by one man, Edward Leeds-Skalman, a frail little hermit. With no modern machinery and with no help, he somehow hand-carved and lifted every single block, a total of 3 million pounds.
Now, if Leonard Nimoy was telling you about it, you knew it was going to be creepy. Now, I've wondered for a long while when the Coral Castle would finally be called in as a hometown legend. I didn't think it would take nearly 9 years, but late is better than never. So thank you again, Farron, for taking the time to make the call. Now, before we move on, a quick reminder to visit our merchandise shop. There are all sorts of products available to you. Stuff like hats, shirts, totes, stickers, posters. And be sure to get you a Halloween shirt. We do a new design each year, and as of now, most of the designs are fully stocked. So head on over to monstersamonguspodcast.com/shop today. And Sarah just informed me today that she's placing our annual hoodie order in just a few weeks. Visit our shop at monstersamonguspodcast.com and place your order today. There will be 2 designs available this year. First is the Campfire Bigfoot design by Jonathan Dodd, and the second is the Patreon-exclusive phone booth design by Jordan Hirschberger. Now, just know you have to be a Patreon supporter to order the phone booth design, but don't forget about that 7-day free trial, because that is your little workaround. Now, both designs will be printed on high-quality zip-up hoodies in sizes from small all the way up to 4X. And I was assured that these bad boys will be delivered long before Christmas, which is a good thing because they make amazing gifts for Monsters Among Us listeners. I have one and I wear it on the regular. Now, don't delay. The pre-order and your chance to pick one of these up will end on October 4th of 2024. So visit monstersamonguspodcast.com today and smash that shop tab. Now, this next entry is like something straight out of a movie. A movie about a village stalking monster south of the border. Vader. Welcome aboard, my lord.
Hey, Derek. This is Vader, a frequent offender. I'm calling to share this story from my dad. He was from this little town in Mexico. I forgot the exact name of it, but it was in Guadalajara, Mexico. Basically, the way I know it, it's called El Vampiro de Belén. And basically, it means the vampire of Belén. I don't know if that's the name of the town or whatever. Basically, the story was that there was this cemetery where there was this guy that was like an undertaker. And for whatever reason, he was like an outcast. And basically, he just kept to himself and nobody really talked to him or whatever, except for like when people were, dead, he would like handle them. So anyways, the story goes from my dad is that eventually people started to like disappear. And they were found later, like drained of blood. And so it happened that when they were found, they were around the cemetery. So immediately they thought this guy was the one killing them and he was a vampire. So they went around, trying to find the guy. And for whatever reason, they couldn't find him. And then he would reappear. And when he would reappear, it was always at night. So it was like weird. So they were like trying to get her townsfolk together to stop the guy because they thought, honestly, it was this guy. So then they went around, and more people started to disappear and more people found dead, drained in blood and stuff like that. And, all around this cemetery. And they're like saying, oh, yeah, it has to be this guy. To make a long story short, they basically like did this whole like, pitchforks and torches thing with them. And they encountered the guy and they chased him up like a lighthouse or like a bell tower or something. And he couldn't, leave or whatever. So they confronted him, and the guy like jumped off the side of the bell tower and, landed and supposedly like was dead. And then they're like, oh, well, I guess he wasn't a vampire. So they went down and they checked for his body and they couldn't find him. So then the murders and stuff stopped. So the legend was that basically he was chased off by these townsfolk and wasn't around there anymore. So anyways, so that's that rendition that my dad told me, but I looked it up on Google and there's another rendition. It's definitely like a known thing. I found it on Google because I tried to find like, well, was my dad pulling in my leg or was it an actual legend? And it turned out, yeah, it is an actual legend of that place. I'm going to try and send you a link to it so, you can share it with everybody else. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, it was a neat story that my dad always told me and I was found it freaky. And, I don't remember if, like, the guy ever was found or any more deaths or whatever, and the website doesn't really tell me what happened with people. So, yeah, it's good to find it out. All right, well, bye.
Thank you, Vader. Now, how many of you had vampires on your Hometown Legends bingo card? I guess it's better to have it on your card than in your hometown. Just ask Vader's dad. Now, I say it often, but the stories that come out of Mexico and Central America are always wild and always interesting. And Vader's tale followed that trend to a T. So big thanks, Vader, for the vampire tale and for reminding us of the magic that takes place down there. Now, folks, we're going to take another quick break, but we'll be right back with a trio of calls that will haunt you for days. To lead us into the break is 66 Steps with their song, Warlock.
time this season.
Have you spoken with him?
I have.
Have any of the...
But for some reason, we keep on trying to blur the lines. Well,
Now, one of my favorite types of hometown legends are treasure stories. Tales about the treasure at Oak Island, the lost Dutchman's mine, or from my home state, the hoard hidden by Morgan's raiders. Well, here with his own hometown treasure tale is Chris from the Lone Star State of Texas.
Good afternoon, Derek. My name is Chris from Uvalde, Texas. I was calling again because I'm listening to part 2 of your season 6 finale when you've asked for treasure stories. And this is one my grandfather had told me when I was a young teen, like 12, 13, somewhere around there. The story takes place in Utopia, Texas. It's just a small, quaint little town in the Texas Hill Country. Well, we would go up because his brother and sister lived there, and we'd go to the river and just for a nice drive. Drive through the hills, wooded area and all that, and just nice. Well, one day we were going up there, and he always told me stories about our ancestors from the Civil War lived in the mountains up there because they were Confederates, and after the war they hid there for a couple of years. But those were usually the stories. But I remember one time he told me when he was a young man, he was working for the highway department, either highway, railroad, something like that. But he was working for a department, and they were doing some work up there. And he started telling me about an old Indian treasure that back in the day some Indians had raided one of those mail carriers, those trolleys, something, and raided it, took the belongings and treasures and hid them and buried them. Well, they left markers, paintings on rocks, etches in trees, just different stuff like that to lead you. Well, he heard it from when he was a kid because his mother was a full-blooded Native American. Her name was Lucy Whitecloud. But he was telling me that while he was a young man working out there, he was actually finding some of these markers, paintings on rocks and etches on rocks that he could tell had been there for a long time. And he tried following them, but because the ranchers and just property owners had cleared brush for hunting or just different things here and there, these markers had ended up being destroyed. But he had told me that he had found some of these markers, and he got him excited. He always said he could have found more and possibly found it because he thought that would have been the coolest thing. Well, thank you so much for your podcast. I absolutely love listening to you. Thank you so much, and keep up the good work. Take care.
Thank you, Chris. I love a good treasure story for 2 reasons. For starters, being a paranormal podcaster doesn't exactly pay the big bucks, so finding a stack of gold coins would be life-changing for me and my family. Who wouldn't want that? But more so because of the adventure of it all, the history of it, the idea that whatever the treasure may be, it's been out there all this time, and you could possibly be the next person to lay hands on it, to hold it, to possess it. Now that feeling might overtake the monetary value for me. That sense of adventure, that sense of discovery. And you know these treasures are still out there, waiting to be found. You hear about one every once in a while. Someone digging a foundation to a house uncovers a cache of thousands of Native American artifacts. Or a metal detectorist finds that one rare coin that's somehow worth an immense fortune. Or a story like this one, when a couple out for a walk made a discovery that changed their lives forever.
Northern California is known as gold country, and today we learned that a family near San Francisco struck it rich in their own backyard. They stumbled across an old can sticking out of the ground. Then they found 7 more. Inside were 1,400 mint-condition gold coins from the 19th century. Some of them are so rare they could be worth $1 million apiece. The couple wants to remain anonymous, plans to sell the coins online.
Now that clip courtesy of CBS Evening News. And just goes to show you that sometimes it pays to pick up garbage. So thank you again, Chris, for sharing your story and giving us hope that we might discover our own. As tonight's only treasure story, I'm certainly happy to have it. Now, real quick, before we launch into those spooky calls I teased about earlier, I want to remind everyone to check out Monsters Among Us Jr., our spin-off series that drops each and every Wednesday. And if you're a youngster, let's say 18 and younger, we want to hear your paranormal story. Give us a call on our toll-free hotline at 1-833-MAU-KIDS, or shoot us a voicemail to monstersamongusjr@gmail.com. Now, kids, remember to get your parents' permission before calling in. We're super excited to launch this new spin-off, but we need your help to keep it afloat. So get those Monsters Among Us Jr. calls in today.
Expire 168 hours after.
Okay.
It was a lot has to do with the. This isn't just a phenomenon in the situation.
Now, what do a school, a hospital, and a highway all have in common? They're all the subject of these next few calls. Let's begin with Robert's entry out of the state of Texas.
Yes, this is Robert in Amarillo. I have a hometown legend. There's several of them here, but this one's about a school called Summit Elementary. Originally, the story is that there was a janitor there, and he did awful things to kids there, and unspeakable things. So, the story is you go there, and you can hear kids playing, see things moving and whatnot. And so, I actually had experienced this when I was younger. I went out there with some friends. We were just hanging around because hearing about it, seeing if it was all haunted and whatnot. And there was hardly any wind that night, and we started hearing little kids laughing. And, of course, we're all in our 20s. And then this one swing on the swing set started swinging by itself. And keep in mind, there's hardly any wind, not even enough to blow this, because these are those old chain rings with the rubber seats and all that. And yeah, not exactly sure how that happened. There's more to the legend of it. I'd have to look online to read up about it, but that's my story.
Thank you, Robert. A haunted school. Having a haunted school on the list of hometown legends is absolutely no surprise to me. We hear that kind of thing all the time. But laughing, disembodied children, I don't know about that one. Not something I want to experience. And luckily, I probably won't, because my learning days are long behind me. But the same can't be said for a hospital, because the older I get, the better my chances become of visiting one. And if you thought a school with laughing ghost children was creepy, wait until you hear about Zach's Hospital in North Carolina.
Hi, Derek. This is Zach from North Carolina again with another, I guess, potential hometown legend. I'm not really sure if this will count because it's so difficult to get stories from this place. But I grew up about 15 minutes from a place called Cherry Hospital. Now, Cherry Hospital, there's a lot going on there now, and they've since moved buildings. But the original building was completed and depending on what publication you're reading, it was either opened in 1880 or 1890. But regardless of that, it was first built and purposed as an asylum specifically for, in its own words, the colored insane. It was actually called the Asylum for the Colored Insane. Again, built between 1880 and 1890. This was directly after the Civil War, specifically for the insane black people to go. And it served the entire state of North Carolina. So you can imagine how many black individuals were forced into this situation, and God only knows how they were treated. And it stayed that way until 1964, at which point it began servicing white mental patients, and then eventually the criminally insane after that. The thing about this place is, as terrible as the history is, in the original document that states, and I'm not even sure what the document would be called, but I've seen it with my own eyes, and I used to have a copy of it on my old phone, but I've since got a new one, and now I can't seem to find it. But in the original document that stated what this hospital would be and what its purpose would be, it says very clearly that it was built on top of Native American burial grounds. So let's do a quick recap, Derek. We have an insane asylum that for the better part of 100 years serviced specifically black people and treated them as well as you would expect black people to be treated in that time, on top of a Native American burial ground. If this were a movie, I wouldn't watch it because it's too cliche. It's too perfect. It doesn't sound believable, but I promise you, Derek, it is 100% real. Everything that I just said is 100% true. If there's ever been a perfect storm for a haunting, it is this place. And I will save you the time and the energy in trying to find out whether or not anyone's been in. No. The city of Goldsboro will not let any paranormal investigation group into this building, onto the site. The few stories that have leaked have mainly been about the normal stuff. Sounds, doors slamming on floors that you know are empty, voices coming from places that you know no one is, stuff like that. There's a few stories circulating about a woman that you can see standing in a window. But I can tell you personally, driving by the place feels terrible. I've been in cars with people driving by the building that have gotten physically ill, almost to the point of throwing up. When you drive by, everything seems to get darker. It can be a gorgeous day outside, and it's like a cloud is hanging over this place. There's been a few books and a few publications and a few stories that come out here and there. If you Google them, you'll find them. I'll send you the document if I can ever find it, stating where it was built and what it was built on top of. It's estimated, now there are 2 cemeteries on the property itself. However, in the early 2000s, there was a land survey done, and this is just coming from my memory, so this may be off, but I believe it was 2,000 unmarked graves were found on the property as well. Given its history, given the number they found, it is not unreasonable to believe that there is anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people that were buried unceremoniously on these grounds. Again, if you are trying to think of a believable plot to a horror movie, this wouldn't be it. It's got too much of everything. But it's true. It's 100% true. Again, I don't really know if this is a hometown legend or not. It's a legend around here. I can tell you that. People will talk about it, and people get real quiet when you start talking about this place. But yeah, check it out. As everyone says, love the show. We all say it because we do. You're awesome. Thanks, Derek. Have a good one.
We appreciate the call, Zach. And when we receive that document, I'll be sure to post it up in the show notes. But in the meantime, Delaney dug up a pretty good article about the Cherry Hospital, and I've linked to it over in the show notes. But the following excerpt gives you a pretty good idea of what sort of place this was. Patients of Cherry Hospital have endured a cavalcade of therapeutic abuses, including electroshock therapy and being placed in cages, as well as simple neglect. An entire ward of the hospital was closed in 2008 after a patient was neglected for almost an entire day. The patient died after being found unresponsive. Certainly not the sort of place you want to find yourself in, or anyone that you care about. And you know, like I was saying earlier, they should make these spaces available to the public, even if only limited. Now, not only to preserve history, but mostly because I want to hear about all the stories that will follow once they open the doors. And speaking of opening up, there's nothing like the open road, the wind in your face and the headlights in the darkness, gliding down the asphalt like blood through an artery. There's nothing like it until you encounter something that makes you wish you were safe at home and not miles away from the next street lamp. Michaela from Montana has just such a story. So let's welcome her to the program.
Hey Derek, this is Michaela calling again from the Flathead region of Montana. I actually chatted with my boss about your podcast yesterday while we were heading up to Kalispell, and he happened to tell me about a local legend in the area. This story takes place on Montana Highway 28. I'm not quite sure how old this tale dates back, but my boss told me that he was told this story as a child and it has always stuck with him. First, I'll set the scene as to where this specifically takes place. If you're going down Montana Highway 93 and you turn onto Montana Highway 28 heading towards Plains, there's this road called Browns Meadow. This story occurs just past Browns Meadow. This area of Montana is mountainous, there's some rolling hills, and it has a ton of cow pastures. That and then some really, really old shacks and barns that are kind of off in the distance. Some are closer to the road, but, you know, broken down, falling apart. Very picturesque, to put it simply. This is how the story goes. There was a family living in the area, not too far from where Montana 28 highway now lies. They were living in a small farmhouse or a shack that was right there. I'm sure they had animals and whatnot. But this family had a daughter who was not happy, so she wanted to run away. She wanted to escape her family. As this young woman was trying to get away, she was either struck by a moving car or trampled by a herd of horses or something along those sorts. She was struck by something moving and it unfortunately killed her. This legend says that if you're driving down this road at night and you see a woman on the side of the road, that you're supposed to pull over onto the side of the road, unlock your vehicle, and then continue on the road. If you check in your rearview mirror, this young woman should be in your back seat and on to her next destination. You don't have to speak with her. You don't have to open the door for her. Just slow down and unlock your doors for her to feel welcomed. I've been told that if you see this woman and decide not to stop, that within a mile down the road you will experience car issues. Things like a busted tire or a cracked windshield, things along these sorts. I happen to drive this road close to daily for work, and I pass the shack that this legend is associated with. I've not seen this woman yet, but if I were to, I would gladly slow down for her to catch a ride. I've come to notice all the shredded semi-tires not too far down the road from that location of the shack, and can't help but think that maybe these people haven't been stopping to pick this poor woman up. If you do pick her up, she'll be thankful, and she will leave when she gets to her destination, but if you don't pick her up and rescue her, she will make sure you know that you screwed up. So that is the legend, and I would love to know if anyone else in this general region of Montana has had any experiences with this woman, and if this story can be found anything, really, to back up this legend. I'm hoping someone else out here knows what I'm talking about, and thanks for your time. I'm really hoping that someone else knows this legend and can hopefully add to it. Thanks, Derek. You have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, Michaela. There's no better setting for a hometown legend than the open road. At least, in my opinion. Now, despite our efforts, we couldn't find much on this legend, but we have shared a good number of calls from Big Sky Country. That's Montana, for those that don't know. About a hitchhiking humanoid, with backward-facing legs that are said to be reminiscent of a goat. So could it be the same character in all of these stories, including Michaela's, but just told with slightly different details? Now perhaps you're from Montana and you've heard of this legend. If so, give me a ring and I'll be sure to get Michaela filled in. In the meantime, a huge thanks to Robert, Zach, and Michaela for sharing those blood-curdling legends.
Out Long Beach.
Flower, it's a 4-car crash that thankfully has been moved over to the right shoulder.
Truth, love truth. And this is fundamental truth as we explore.
Angels would fight.
Tall, standing upright, he's half man and half beast. If you see him late at night, you may be his next feast. By the light of the moon lives the dogman of doom. Beware the beast of night. Yellow eyes may be your last sight. Lock your doors, stay at home. See yourself inside your realm. Beware the dog man. Dogman of doom.
Now that was Metal Ghost Dad with Dogman of Doom. And speaking of Dogman, what hometown legend special is complete without a Dogman story? Not one that I would be proud of, that's for sure. So to deliver on that promise, please welcome Cody from Parts Unknown.
Hello, Derek and Monsters Among Us listeners. My name is Cody. I grew up in Alabama, and I'd like to talk about a cryptid my dad always told me about called Whitey. This pretty much follows on par with most of the other things I heard about the Alabama White thing, but this take on that is a bit different in the sense that the Alabama White thing was mostly some sort of Bigfoot type, but Whitey was more of a four-legged, huge mutated wolf type of creature that had pristine white hair. This happened back in the 1940s in the upper mid area of Alabama where my dad grew up. My dad never actually saw it, but he would always hear it. It did make the famous woman screaming bloody murder sound, but what alarmed my dad was how loud it was. He pointed out that it mostly screamed on nights where there was no moon, or there was overcast skies, or it was as dark as possible at night. And there were never any reports of Whitey hurting anyone or even any of the animals. They had a farm out there. My dad had a friend who claimed to have seen it when he was a kid. He was riding a bike when he happened upon it, and that it went from walking on all fours to standing up on its hind legs, and it stood to be about 10 feet tall, and let out a deafening scream, which traumatized my dad's friend, and he actually never liked talking about it. My dad and the rest of his family relocated and never went back there because it was deeply unnerving to all he knew who heard it. My dad would always tell me the story to me and my friends when we would have campfires, and it always stuck with me, and I always wanted to call in and tell the story. But anyway, Derek, huge fan of the show. I love what you do. I'm a Patreon supporter. Keep up the great work, and thanks for listening.
That sounds like a Dogman to me, Cody. We appreciate you calling in. Now, we snooped around a bit and found a few things from the Yellowhammer state that sort of fall in line with Cody's report and hometown legend. Firstly is a creature folks in the Mobile area call the Wolf Woman, a large canid with a human woman's face and hair. Reports were sent into newspapers during a flap in the early 1970s. But upon closer inspection, the dates on which those articles ran all seem to align with that of April Fools. So take all of that with a grain of salt. Now, a link to one of those articles covering the Wolf Woman is available there in the show notes. And there's even a drawing that a witness made. A disturbing drawing, if I may say so myself. So visit our show notes at monstersamonguspodcast.com and click the show notes tab, if you dare. Now, not all of the information we found was easily excused by a childish holiday. The following was located on a subreddit about Alabama cryptids, and in it the user writes the following. There have been several stories from Central Alabama law enforcement seeing questionable things. I can recall right off a state trooper was driving down the road and something to his left caught his eye as he was cruising. He slowed his car down and saw what he initially thought to be a large coyote, but when he shined his light on it, it was a large wolf-looking creature, which then stood up on its hind legs, grabbed a deer carcass, and darted into the brush. There have been many sightings like this in the Lowndes County area. So maybe something is out there, something that's witnessed from time to time by passing motorists or the occasional hunter. Something yet to be discovered. Something completely unnatural. Thank you again, Cody, for calling in.
Again, the real issue here, Charlie, is are you looking...
800 gambler in New York.
He's a 3-time Pro Bowler at center. That's the... Say, is there a way we can...
Now, what can you think of that's worse than an 8-foot-tall wild canine? How about a gigantic beaver? Here with that tale is Logan, from up there in Oregon.
Hey, Derek. It's Logan. I'm 17 from the state of Oregon, and I wanted to enter, I guess you could say a hometown legend, more of a river town legend. I don't know. But up in the Willamette River where I live, there's a legend called Big Brown, which is honestly ridiculous and kind of funny, but worth sharing. So the legend of Big Brown started in the 1940s when he was first sighted during the Willamette Valley Project, which was a series of dam buildings they were building 13 dams to help with the flooding. But unfortunately, it's hampered with the flow of the river, which is said to have awoken something. Now, the workers were members of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they were actually driven away, and what they had seen was this incredibly large beaver with glowing red eyes. I believe it destroyed the dams that they tried to build, and it had actually killed 3 people. No bodies were ever discovered, but it had caused such an uproar that workers and civilians, about 200 of them, had patrolled the Willamette River after that in order to hunt him down and keep him away. Now, eventually he stopped attacking, and then they continued on building the dams peacefully. But there are still sightings of Big Brown to this day. He was last spotted sunbathing on Collins Beach, and it said his home is up in North Portland. So I just thought it would be funny to, share a little bit of funny little myths and legends here in Oregon to lighten up the mood and stuff. So, love the podcast. I listen to it all the time at work, and I got my cousin onto it recently. I hope this story finds you use. All right, bye.
It killed 3 workers and destroyed a dam. I'm starting to think the beaver is much worse. Because say what you want about the dog man, but there aren't a lot of stories out there about them attacking or harming people. I guess the same can't be said for old Big Brown. Now, it's worth noting that there was once a giant beaver that roamed much of what is now the United States, including places like Oregon. They call the creature the giant beaver, which was very creative of them, and it went extinct somewhere around 12,000 years ago. Now, scientists estimate that the giant beavers were 5 to 6 feet long and weighed about 120 to 220 pounds. I'd say that's a size capable of killing a man if it wanted to, especially out in the water. So at the very least, there is some sort of basis for this story. It is possible that a few of these giants have survived all of this time. So at the very least, there seems to be some basis for this story. But is it possible that a few of these giants survived all of this time? It's incredibly unlikely, but not at all impossible. So great story, Logan. And thank you for introducing a brand new cryptid to us. A big thanks for calling in. Now, folks, we're nearing the end here. I only have a handful of stories left. That is, unless you're a Monster Squad member over at Patreon. Because every week we extend each episode by 20 or 30 minutes, playing more calls, following up on information from past calls, or offering After Dark and Rebuttal special episodes. Just head on over to patreon.com and search for Monsters Among Us Podcast. Then join that $5 level to get instant access to the entire back catalog, which at this point is days worth of content. Now, if you're on a budget but you'd still like to help out, keep in mind you can get all of the main episodes absolutely ad-free for only $1 a month. And best of all, your membership directly helps the show continue to grow. Growth like Monsters Among Us Jr. and the brand new Tuesday episodes. We can't thank you enough for any and all help you can provide. Now, to prime us for this next entry, we must first begin with a song. And like Senor Pinch's Dogman Blues from a few hometown legends ago, this next musical number has been stuck in my head all week long. So here is Graveyard Train, all the way from Australia, with Even Witches Like to Go Out Dancing.
Hey buddy, better make it a double. The young man overlooks any pile. He steps up and throws the ladies a line. Take my hand, you're the one I fancy. Even witches like to go out dancing. Whispers, baby, come back to our lair. There's a party going on there. Even witches like to go out dancing. Witches like to go out dancing.
What can I say? I'm a sucker for a song with a chain in it. Now, I highly encourage you to hit up the show notes and check out Graveyard Train and all the other artists featured tonight. In fact, I think I need to put a Spotify playlist together of all of these paranormal-themed bangers. I'll work on that in the off-season. But in the meantime, how about a hometown legend about a witch to go along with that little ditty? Please welcome this anonymous caller from parts unknown.
My name's going to remain anonymous, and it's a unique name in a very small area. I'm calling about kind of less an experience, more of looking into something. So this is last December, so it's December 2023. My dad and I were looking for a place to find a Christmas tree. We always go and cut our own. And we were trying to find a specific farm that we had gone to before. And on the way, we kind of went through some back roads from where I was. And this is up in upstate New York. It's called Partridge Run is where we wound up finding this thing. So we were searching around, and I was kind of calling the shots on where we were turning. And I was just kind of being drawn more and more towards certain roads, like almost like an intuitive type thing. And a little bit about me is I just started learning how to read tarot cards and getting into more spiritualism, so I don't know if that's something to do with that. But we wound up getting and finding this really, really old gravesite, graves from like 1780, 1800s. And I was drawn to this one grave that was very cleaned up. It had a lot of flowers at it, and it was fenced in, very different from all the other graves that are around it. And the name was Eva Messer. And when looking into it more, it happened to be a person that was thought to be a witch. Her name was Eva Messer, or Eva Boeckel, Boeckel. And I just found her story to be very interesting. Like I said, I've always been really drawn to that. And looking into her, I couldn't find a ton. I couldn't really find a lot. So I was hoping that you guys could look more into that. It's not very often that you have a witch from where you're from. I just thought that was pretty interesting, and I've always wanted to go back, but now I'm back at school down in Florida, so I won't be able to go back into the summer. And I was just very drawn to this cemetery, this graveyard, and specifically to her grave. And I really just wanted to sit there and talk to her, but I wasn't able to do that. So I was hoping you guys could look more into it. Thank you. I really enjoyed the podcast. I started listening to it during my Christmas break last semester when I was flying home, and I've been binging it ever since. So keep up the great work, and I look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Stories about supposed witches are typically a depressing affair. But on the surface, they make great hometown legends. That is, until you begin to realize that the so-called witch you're discussing was likely just an unusual or eclectic person, living on the fringes of society, keeping to themselves. You see, I promise you they would have burned my ass 300 or 400 years ago. They wouldn't have thought twice about it. Any interest in anything paranormal was the devil's work and would not be tolerated by religious zealots. A bum deal when you really think about it. But despite all that, we tried our best to find some information on this legend, and came up a bit short. But the beauty of the show is that some 100,000 people tune in to each episode. So the chance of someone out there having more information on this than we do is pretty good. So I'll go ahead and open it up here. If you have some input for our caller on her local quote-unquote witch, give me a call at 888-608-NIGHT, or shoot me an email at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Let's see what we can stir up. But in the meantime, thank you again, caller, for the entry and for calling in.
High school basketball champion. One guy only eats fast food. Factor was developed by doctors. It's 100%.
Nasdaq was up 100. S&P was up 14.
Revive real estate.
Now I only have a couple of calls left, but have no fear. There's still tons of content to share here tonight. In fact, our next entry tells us about a location that's on my short list of places to visit soon. A mining town in the great American Southwest. James from Arizona. Go ahead with your hometown legend.
Hello, Derek. This is James. I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona. I have a hometown legend story for you. I'm originally from Kentucky, and my grandmother, at the time the story took place, was retired in Prescott Valley, Arizona. My family decided that we were going to take a trip across the country to visit my grandmother, who's on my mother's side, and this was in the early 90s. My aunt and uncle was also going to make the trek from their home states to come and visit and spend time with the family. So we get there, and my grandmother has this idea that we should go up over the mountain from Prescott, over the Mingus Mountain, and go visit this old town called Jerome, Arizona. And so we get into two different vehicles. We load up, we go, and we cross over the top of the mountain and switchbacks down into the town. A little backstory on Jerome, Arizona. The town was founded in 1899, and it got its start as a copper mining town. The elevation is just over 5,000 feet. So we're walking around the town. We're separated in our own little groups, just doing a little sightseeing. And I'm with my grandmother, and we're just kind of walking around up this hill. And I wanted to go up to the top of this hill to take a look at this old structure. this old building. And we're walking beside it, and while we're walking beside it, I noticed that there's a face that's peering out from one of the windows of this building. And as we're walking, it's kind of following us. And I kind of stopped for a moment, and I notice in one of the other windows, there's another face looking at us, another person. And I asked my grandmother, I said, who are these people that are looking at us? Now, mind you, I was around 11 years old at the time. And she said, what are you talking about? Like, where do you see these faces? And I'm pointing up at this with these windows. And I said, these people are looking at us and they're kind of watching us. Why are they watching us? And she stops for a moment and she peers up at the building and she's scanning and scanning. And she grabs my hand and takes me down the hill to a Catholic church. I think it's called the Holy Family Church. And she takes me inside. And my grandmother, she was raised Catholic, not a devout Catholic by any means, but she was raised Catholic, and she takes me into the Catholic Church, I guess, because it kind of freaked her out. And I'm young, and I'm not really aware of why or what's going on. I just know she took me immediately straight to the church. So years later, I always remembered that story, and I didn't really understand all the details of the story. Now being much older, I moved to Arizona and now live in Phoenix. Did a lot of research on Jerome and finding out that during the time that we visited my grandmother and went to Jerome, Arizona, this was in the early 90s, and the United Verde Hospital was closed down, and it was completely empty. So I thought, right? So now I'm finding out that the place is really haunted. And there's a lot of occurrences that happen in the building to this day, and a lot of ghost tours take place and a lot of what you would call dark tourism, because now in the mid-90s, they actually, somebody purchased it and opened it up as a hotel. So the hospital was in operation from 1926 until 1950, and then now is a operating hotel. And I now realize, putting the pieces together, that the people that were staring at me from this building were not people at all, but they were in fact apparitions. Once I put all those pieces together, it kind of gave me quite the chill up and down my spine. And so now, my grandmother passed away in 2011, and I never really got the chance to talk to her. I would like to speak to her if I could to this day, to ask her more about that story, because I still don't know if she saw what I saw, because after scanning the windows, she just immediately grabs my hand, takes me to the church. So I don't know if she saw what I saw, or she just was a little freaked out because I seen something that she couldn't see. But anyways, that is my story. Hopefully it makes it on the show. There's a lot of other stories about the building. I know that there was a live-in caretaker that apparently committed suicide, or maybe there's just some strange circumstances surrounding the death of that caretaker that I think happened in the building itself. There's a lot of stories, so feel free to do your own research and check it out. It's pretty fascinating. Anyways, Derek, I love the show. I've been listening to you for about 6 months now, and super excited to see your shows hit and check out the new content. So thanks for what you do. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, James. The old Jerome Hotel. You see, that entire town is steeped in history and absolutely saturated with paranormal activity. And from my understanding, the hotel/former hospital seems to be the epicenter of it all. Now, it should come as no surprise that there is supernatural activity reported at the hotel. After all, its history as a hospital alone could warrant such claims. But the death of a caretaker is only the tip of the iceberg. And who better to elaborate than someone that literally grew up in the hotel? The current owner, courtesy of Arizona Highways TV.
Chris Altier was raised in the Jerome Grand Hotel, the town's former hospital, and one of the most haunted buildings around.
A lot of the housekeepers even would kind of share stories, and they would say they'd be cleaning rooms from time to time, and you would just get that real cold chill kind of go through you. Just hearing all of the old hospital stories. There was one death a day approximately in this building. They were doing a lot of operations, and a lot of those were amputations.
That alone wouldn't be so creepy if the chute where all those body parts were disposed of wasn't in one of the hotel hallways.
The surgeons and the doctors were able to come out of the operating room, which is down on this hallway, and they were able to walk to that chute and dispose of some pretty gruesome things that were coming out of the operating room.
People say the ghosts roam the halls, and visitors to the Jerome Grant Hotel claim they've seen them.
Now, where have we heard another example of a haunted hospital with a death chute? If you said Kentucky's Waverly Hills, you'd be dead on. And like I said, a visit to Jerome is likely in my near future. And now, instead of getting an Airbnb, I think maybe we'll try our hand at the Jerome Grand Hotel. If their claim of 1 death per day is true, then surely we'll be able to experience something unusual ourselves. With those kind of numbers, I imagine it's hard not to. And before we move on to tonight's closer, I just want to commend the Jerome Grand Hotel for opening their doors to explorers and investigators alike. And they get to make money off of it. It's a win-win. And it was a win-win for us as well, James. So thank you again for sharing that story. Now, folks, before I introduce tonight's, for the most part, final call, a quick update on our release schedule. You see, typically, I would take a bit of a break after our season finale, to take a few weeks off to recharge the batteries and get some work done that we don't normally have time for. But it just so happens that the end of season 17 coincides with the peak of spooky season. And any fan of this show can tell you, that's our time to shine. So as much as me and my entire crew need a breather, we're going to instead jump right into season 18 and worry about that break a little later down the line. We just can't leave you high and dry this spooky season. So in short, I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. I don't think it'll quite be the Amusement Worker special just yet, but that episode will be released soon. Either way, we'll have everything back to normal in just a few weeks. But in the meantime, you'll continue to get your 2 episodes a week, all the way through the spooky season. Now, back to the season 17 finale. And I have a pretty interesting and unsettling entry to entertain you with. An unusual experience from the state of Colorado, from a caller named Anthony.
Hey Derek, my name is Anthony and I have a submission for your Hometown Legends episode. Now, before I get to that, I just want to let you know I've been a faithful listener almost from the beginning. I've heard every single episode and listen religiously every week, so love what you're doing. Now I want to talk about my hometown, which is a little town called Pueblo, Colorado, which is about 35-40 minutes south of Colorado Springs, if you know where that's at. Now, Pueblo is a very historic old town, therefore it has a ton of paranormal legends and paranormal stories throughout the entire area of what's considered Pueblo. Now, I grew up in a little farm community that's actually east of Pueblo, and we were a group of teenagers that would just love to go out and be scared. So we were not really ghost hunting, but it was kind of like ghost hunting before ghost hunting was cool. So maybe once or twice a month, we would go try to find one of these haunted places that were rumored to be in the Pueblo area. Now, on this particular day, we were out at this little convenience store on a lane called 36 Lane, which is kind of a prominent kind of intersection in this little farm community. And we were talking about going out to this scary bridge that was actually south of Highway 50 on 36 Lane. And this old farmer interrupted us and said, that's not the scariest legend out here. And so he told us this story. He said that once upon a time, there was this group of teenagers that was driving out to that very bridge that we were talking about going out to. And as they were driving and they got farther out, the farms and the ranches become fewer and farther between. And so as they were driving and talking about, what they were going to see at the bridge, they noticed this white kind of husky dog that was sitting by a mailbox. And out there in those communities, it's so dark at night that they actually have reflectors by the mailboxes and on the mailboxes, so you don't run into them if you drove off the road. So they see these reflectors, and then of course they see this dog. Now, it was curious to them because the dog didn't chase them, and it was just sitting there by the side of the road. But as they continued to talk and they got to the very next farm, which is maybe a quarter of a mile up the road, they saw an identical white husky dog sitting by that mailbox. And so because they were scared and they were already in that mood, they kind of looked at it as, hey, isn't that weird or isn't that odd? But, maybe the discussions of it being two puppies from the same litter, the two neighbor farmers had the same dogs type of thing. But as they drove maybe about another mile up the road to the next farm, at the mailbox was sitting an identical white husky dog. And so as we tell the story today, that may seem, not that big of a deal. But if you were in that car, it's easy to understand why that would seem abnormal. And you're already scared anyway. You're in the middle of nowhere. And definitely when we were teenagers, there was no cell phones. So they began to converse about, should we keep going to this bridge and maybe try to find another way back to maybe I-25 and get back home that way? Or should we turn around? Because there's something not right about this dog situation. But as they continued to talk, the decision kind of made itself, because as they got to the next farm on the right, there it was again, the identical white husky dog. And so now the conversations about, is this the same litter of puppies, was now no longer a conversation. This is something wrong. This is creepy, paranormal, whatever. So they decided to go up, flip the car around on a dirt road, and start heading back. Of course, that creates a problem because they're going to have to pass these dogs again. So the farmer is telling us this story, and we're on edge. You can imagine us sitting in this convenience store hearing this story from this old farm guy. And he says, as this group of teenagers continued up the road, now these farms that they were looking at on their right are now on their left. And so they're focused intently looking for the mailbox to see if the dog was there. But as they passed the first house, there was no dog. So, the conversation became, were we just overreacting? Maybe these dogs went back in the house. So they got to the next house, again, no dog. But one person in the car noticed that there was a farm coming up on the right side of the road. And as they got to that farm and looked by the mailbox, there it was, the white husky dog. And so they began to panic. So the driver of this car full of teens steps on the gas, except this time the dog props up on its hind legs and starts running alongside of the car. So on the passenger side of this car is this white husky dog on its hind legs with red eyes staring into the vehicle. And it's chasing them at 60 or 70 miles an hour. So this group of teens, of course, is terrified, and somehow, according to the story, they escape the little demon dog there, and they drive back into town and, begin to tell the story to everybody. Now, I had never heard this story before, and we were pretty active in the paranormal world of this little town. We thought we had heard every story in every scary place that we can visit, but so this was new. So of course, like dumb teenagers do, we decided that weekend we would drive out on 36th Lane and go to see this demon dog. As we were driving down this road, and it's pretty congested when you first get there, but as you keep driving, there of course is the first set of these mailboxes with reflectors. And Derek, I kid you not, at that very first house, a white husky dog comes running down the driveway, and it's summertime, so we have the windows rolled down on a pickup truck. This dog comes running down the driveway, jumps almost completely into the cab of a four-wheel drive truck. And my buddy was sitting in the passenger seat, I was in the driver's seat, and it literally tried to bite his arm through the truck. Now, we had an extended cab truck, and there was some people in the back, everybody screaming and yelling. So, of course, I just whipped that truck around, did a donut in the dirt, headed back towards South Road, and we never went out there again. Now, I do have to admit that probably wasn't a demon dog. It might have just been a regular dog. But after hearing the story, one of two things occurred. Either the old farmers knew that there was a crazy dog out there that would try to get us, or maybe that dog really was possessed and we just escaped a little quicker than the teens from the original story. Anyway, Derek, love your program once again. Thanks for everything you do. Take care, buddy.
Thank you, Anthony. You know it's gonna be a good tale when it's told by an old farmer. Now listen, like Anthony said, perhaps that area just favored a specific breed. A husky dog. Or perhaps, as he suggested, they were all part of the same litter that was dispersed between several different farms in the area. Or perhaps there was something supernatural going on here. There's no shortage of spooky canine stories. In fact, this isn't even the only eerie dog tale shared here this evening. And it's not the only story we've heard about a canine standing up on its hind legs and chasing would-be victims. And then for Anthony to go to this place where this creature was sighted and to have his own experience of essentially the exact same thing. Well, that's downright legendary. And it's also a good reminder that you too can go out and explore many of these locations. You can take measurements, photographs, psychic readings, whatever you want to do, to determine if you believe in these legends or not. But be careful, because as we discussed earlier, the law is not on your side if you're somewhere that you shouldn't be, regardless of why you're there. But as Anthony has taught us, sometimes you actually find what you're looking for. Or like in Anthony's case, it'll find you. A big thanks to Anthony for calling in tonight, and that goes double for each of this evening's submitters. Now folks, our analytics tell us that we have a huge drop-off at this point in the show. Don't go anywhere. The show is not over yet. Because you see, years ago, I thought it would be cute to stick a secret story behind the outro. Sort of like a bonus track on a CD, if you're old enough to remember that. Well, not only do people love that, but when I tried to do away with it a while back, I got literal hate mail. So I kept it in and have been sharing a secret story ever since. So if you leave early, you're missing a full tale. And yes, I know this ruins the surprise or the secret or whatever. I understand that. But like I said, our data shows that at least 30% of listeners turn it off right about here. So it's a catch-22. What are you gonna do? So anyway, I'm gonna read these credits, play our little outro, run one more ad, because that's how we pay the bills around here, of which there are many. Then I'll be right back with one more hometown legend story. A little tale about little people. At least, I hope these things are people. But first, Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Copyright Red Crow Media. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Delaney Bowers. All media used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. Don't forget about our little film, Shadows in the Desert, High Strangeness in the Borrego Triangle. A little documentary about this area of high strangeness that my friend David Flora and I discovered. Go to borregotriangle.com to find out where you can watch the film today. Now don't forget to follow us on social media. We have accounts on Instagram and Facebook. And while you're online, please leave us a rate and review wherever that's possible. That's always a great way to help the show. And while you're there messing around, give us a like and follow at YouTube. That algorithm hates us, so we're doing all we can to help that channel grow. Now don't forget that you can catch the show every Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern, digitally, on the UnX Network. Just visit unxnetwork.com to tune in. And finally, tonight's score was provided by Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, Co.ag Music, and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Now, folks, I can't thank you enough for making this season one of our best yet, and for allowing us to improve next season. And we can't wait to share that with you. Now, I better catch you on the Tuesday episode, because I promise it to be hauntingly good. Until then, don't forget to stick around for more Monsters Among Us. Until then, keep it spooky, and have yourselves a good night.
Employee at Bridgehampton location.
100.7 Houston that saw them lose Thursday.
As legitimate self-defense.
Now, as I'd mentioned, this is where we hide the secret story, and I typically reserve this space for the strangest of calls, the really weird ones, and tonight is no exception. From the state of Idaho, please welcome RJ to the program.
Hi, Derek. This is RJ from Owyhee County, Idaho, and I have a hometown legend to share with you. There are dwarves in the Owyhee Mountains, and they have tails that wrap around them to camouflage them. These dwarves, however, are cannibalistic, and they have the strength of 10 men, as far as I've heard. I've talked to a couple of my friends, and their fathers are old cowboys that work for Joyce Ranch, one of the oldest families in Idaho, and I've heard numerous tales of the encounters of these dwarves, and that these dwarves are also cannibalistic. They do eat their own, but at the same time, they do take people that are going through, usually on cattle drives and stuff. But, anywho, that is my hometown legends. Love what you do, Derek. Please keep it up, and I will talk to you later with a lot of different stories that I have here in the Treasure Valley. Take care, man.
Don't worry, RJ. I don't have any plans of going anywhere just yet. And thank you for sharing the phone call. Now, based on our research, it sounds like RJ is referring to the Namiragar, a race of cannibalistic dwarves of Shoshone legend. Legends that originate from parts of Wyoming, Utah, and you guessed it, Idaho. Now, it's widely believed that these stories of the Namiragar are simply legend-based, but as RJ sort of alluded to, that might not be the case, because not only could these little guys be real, they might have actually found one mummified. They call it the Pedro Mountain Mummy, and I'll let you learn all about it the same way that I did, from a Season 6 episode of the TV series Unsolved Mysteries.
But all of that would change in 1932, when two men went prospecting in Wyoming.
Cecil Main and Frank Carr were two amateur gold prospectors. And they were in the Pedro Mountains, which is right along the shore of Pathfinder Reservoir, about the center of the state.
This cave sure ain't very deep.
At the back of the cave, Cecil Main and Frank Carr made an extraordinary discovery.
What's that? What? Right here.
Perched on a rocky ledge was a small figure, just 6 inches high, mummified in a sitting position.
Some Indian burial cave or something.
They'd never seen anything like that before and would have no idea what it was, except that they knew it was probably worth taking out.
Several days later, Cecil Main returned to the cave alone. Paying no heed to the notion that the cave was a sacred Indian burial site, Main snatched the mysterious mummy. It has been an object of great controversy and mystery ever since. Over the years, the mummy has come into the possession of a number of different people. Unsubstantiated rumor has it that each of the owners died under unusual circumstances. As far as anyone knows, the most recent owner disappeared without a trace nearly 20 years ago, along with the mummy. Those who believe in the legend of the little people claim a curse is responsible. Others maintain it's all just a coincidence.
Now, the mummy disappeared along with its owner back in 1975, but I imagine it's still out there somewhere. If it happens to be in your garage, by all means, please let me know. But talk about a coincidence. The fact that the tribes of that area told of a race of little people. RJ told of others that have seen these sorts of creatures. And probably most importantly, the mysterious mummy that also fits that description. Maybe it is all just a coincidence. But I like to think maybe there's more to it than that. Whatever it is, I love the story, and it's certainly weird enough to share here as tonight's secret tale. A big thanks to you for following us this far. And while it might seem like the end, it doesn't have to be. I have a handful more hometown legends I plan on sharing over in the Beyond, immediately following this episode. If you're a Monster Squad member, over on Patreon that is. To punch your ticket, join the $5 level for all of the bonus content, the $1 level for all the ad-free content, or test either out for free for 7 days over at patreon.com and by searching for Monsters Among Us podcast over in their little search bar. It's in the Beyond that I share calls like Jared's out of the state of Illinois.
Hey Derek, this is Jared from Illinois again. My story today about a haunted cemetery. Actually, one of the most haunted cemeteries here in Illinois. I originally grew up in Lockport. I moved to Minooka in 2007. I had no idea about the cemetery. I had no idea that I even lived so close to it. I only live a few miles away from it. But it's called the Oxable Cemetery. And I've heard little things about it. And I always wanted to go see it, but I wanted somebody to go with me. I was going alone. So I finally got somebody to go with me. We head there, and the entrance to it is a pretty scary looking place. One lane road.